Hey, like Radnor does, says, oh, it's going to rain, you're going to have thunderstorms. Not, at least not in my house, just 4 blocks away. But we did get about almost an inch since the 3rd with my rain gauge. So we'll take it, won't we? I'd like to welcome, I'm the chair of the board of the Environmental Advisory Council chair, and our big interest is, besides energy conservation and renewable energy, is the natural environment. And the Willistown Conservation Trust has kindly agreed to speak about their efforts in promoting natural surroundings and lawns to meadows. And we just had a native plant giveaway. Our EAC sponsored this right in the parking lot here last weekend, and we have some extra perennial plants in compostable pots in the back of my truck in the parking lot. If you're interested, let me know, and they're free for you to take. So I'll introduce you all to Michael Craney, Director of Stewardship, Willistown Conservation Trust.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We're all having a good evening. So, yes, my name is Mike. I am the Director of Stewardship at Willistown Conservation Trust. So Willistown Conservation Trust is a land trust. We're a nonprofit organization who we are focused on preserving and protecting land. And with that comes all other sorts of programming and special things that I'll sort of get into. But just to orient you, this is sort of a look at where we work up here in sort of the headwaters of the Ridley, Crum, and Darby Creeks. Part of our mission statement is to preserve and manage the open land, natural resources of the Willistown area and nearby communities. And that's really the major focus of my job in the stewardship department. So this map shows you our protected lands. We have 5 nature preserves that we own and manage. 3 of those are open daily to the public, and a 4th that will be opening hopefully a little later this year. We have information about all those over on the back table there if you're interested in kind of learning more about each of our preserves. But then in addition to our preserves, we have conservation easements. We hold over 100 conservation easements on private land. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's very basically an agreement between a landowner and either a nonprofit land trust organization or a government organization, where that organization holds these certain development rights on that private land. So it protects the land in perpetuity from development, and the agreement runs with the land. So it doesn't matter if the land or the land is sold or anything like that. The easement runs with the land, so it's protected forever. So it's really one of the major tools for land trusts and government organizations to preserve land. And as the stewardship department, we are in charge of monitoring those easements, making sure that everybody's abiding by the terms of those, and like I said, managing our nature preserves. So, a big focus of what we do as a stewardship department on our preserves is maintaining the land, and by doing that, we want to preserve sort of the history of what's there, the natural plant communities, rehabilitate sort of native habitat and native ecosystems, and plant communities. So just as a sort of introduction, I want to kind of talk about why we're focused on native plants, why we're managing the land in the way that we're doing, kind of look at some of the different land types and habitat types that we manage and how they kind of differ from one another, just to kind of introduce you to those concepts. And then from there, we kind of take that and move it into sort of your own backyard, private land, how it relates to just, typical landowner gardening, how you can kind of use those concepts in your own yard to, create more ecologically beneficial habitat. So just to start, a brief sort of discussion about native species. because you're here, I assume you all are somewhat familiar with native species and their benefits, but just to give you a sense, so native species are plants basically that have been here since before European colonization, before folks started coming over and bringing new species of plants from Europe and Asia and introducing them, 300-400 years ago. So these are the plants that evolved here, that have been here for a long, long time and evolved alongside all of our native species of insects, birds, animals, all the wildlife. So they really evolved and learned to live and cohabitate together. Because of that, many, many species of insects are specialists. They're plant specialists. I have a monarch butterfly here on milkweed plant. This is a very common example that people learn that the monarch caterpillar needs milkweed in order to complete its life cycle. Without that plant, they can't survive. And that's just one example, but there's thousands of other examples of caterpillars and insects and beetles and things that have exactly that type of relationship with one specific plant. And for that reason, if you don't have that plant, you don't have the bug, you don't have the food for the birds. A lovely picture of a chickadee with a caterpillar. Caterpillars especially are vital for birds. Birds rely heavily on caterpillars to feed their young because they're soft and nutritious. And if you don't have the plants that are supporting that caterpillar larvae, then the birds don't have anything to eat. So that's really the basis of how, the native plants make such a big difference in terms of really supporting the basis of the food web and the ecosystem at large. There's also great benefits, as you can see here, for stormwater and water quality. If you compare some typical sort of prairie native species, like Rudbeckia, big blue stem, a native warm season grass, or perennial fountain grass, compared to this Kentucky bluegrass, typical turf grass, you can see the difference in the root systems here. Typical turf grass has a root system maybe 2 or 3 inches deep, whereas a lot of native species have really, really deep and robust root systems that helps hold the soil in place, that helps hold and gather stormwater. So that helps a lot with stormwater runoff, with flash flooding, with preventing erosion, whereas a typical lawn is really hardly any better than pavement in terms of impervious surface, in terms of collecting and capturing stormwater and preventing stormwater runoff. So that's just a very brief kind of look at some of the main major benefits that we talk about when we think about native plants. Non-native plants aren't necessarily bad, not all of them anyway. The major deficit in a plant that's not native is that you might not get the benefit of those relationships with the ecosystem, like I mentioned, but plenty are, perfectly fine, perfectly not, they're harmless. It's only when they get super aggressive and start to escape into the wild that they become invasive. So there are certain species of non-native plants that become very aggressive when they escape the gardens, and that becomes a problem because if they're aggressive enough, they will invade our wild spaces. They can be so aggressive that they take over a space entirely. They outcompete all of the other things trying to grow there, and then what you end up with is a monoculture of one species of plant covering a whole area, not letting other things grow, and not letting sort of the natural succession and natural plant communities fill in. And like I said before, with those specialized plant relationships, what you really want is a diversity of native plants. That is what's going to provide the most benefit, the most habitat, and the most environmental benefit again for everything from the insects up to the birds and mammals. So a few very common examples here of in some invasive species that you may be familiar with. Barberry, a lot of these are very commonly used in landscape plantings. Birds will sometimes eat the seeds and then spread them in their poop, or they'll get spread by wild animals, or spread on the wind, or spread in floods. And so even though birds will eat some of these fruits on these invasives, they are not as nutritious as a lot of the native fruits that they might otherwise prefer. We like to kind of say that's the difference between a bird, eating a Snickers bar versus a full nutritious dinner. When birds are migrating and they're flying from Canada to South America, they really need to get the most that they can out of what they're eating. And unfortunately, when you have, a hedgerow full of burning bush, for example, or honeysuckle, and that's all they have to eat, then that doesn't really give them the fat content that they need to have the energy to complete their migration. Burning bush and honeysuckle, really common, and multiflora rose. These are the types of things that really invade and take over hedgerows. Vines like honeysuckle vine and Asian bittersweet, and then Japanese stiltgrass. Super common stuff that you see everywhere, and just really aggressive plants that can completely take over and really decimate what otherwise might be beneficial habitat. So the habitats, I'll talk about sort of some of the main types that we look at and how we manage them. First being forest, of course, areas where there are mature trees, an enclosed canopy. You want to manage those to make sure that the canopy is healthy, providing shade, which is important, but also that there's a healthy sort of regeneration and a next generation of trees. So those understory trees, whether they're mid-sized trees or just young canopy trees that are going to grow in and become that next generation. Unfortunately, that's really at risk due to the white-tailed deer pressure. White-tailed deer are extremely overpopulated, and they run rampant in woodlands. They eat and browse and rub on any sort of young tree species that might be growing in and really prevent that natural regeneration that our forests need. So a lot of times in this area, you walk through a woodland and there's really no understory. You can see clear across wherever you are, and that's a big problem. A woodland shouldn't look like a park. It should be dense. There should be different age classes. So that's kind of how we look at our forests on our preserves and try to manage them, make sure that there are new young species planted. When we plant stuff, we do have to put deer protection on it, and pretty much anything we plant gets a cage to protect it from the deer. But also we look at the sort of the understory. You see some nice herbaceous layer of ferns here. But just in the back here, you might not be able to see it, but this is just a mat of stiltgrass. You can kind of see that this is a fairly sunny area, and this is what happens, especially in our woodlands. If you get a tree come down and you get a canopy opening and the sun gets in, the first thing that's going to grow in are those super aggressive invasives. So stiltgrass, barberry, multiflora rose, those types of things, they'll take over. And once they create that mat, it really becomes difficult for the other things to then fill in like they should. So we try to manage for, keeping an eye out for canopy gaps, trying to manage invasives there, try to replant the native species that we would like to see in the forest, depending on the plant communities, and try to manage for the deer. Scrub-shrub habitat is really important. Our Willistown Conservation Trust has a really excellent bird conservation program. We do various different types of bird research. We do migratory bird banding in the spring and fall. We also do breeding bird banding in the summer in our woodlands. We do studies on grassland birds. So they're really experts on this stuff, and their number one sort of thing that they try to hammer home is for people to maintain their scrub-shrub, maintain their shrub habitat, because birds really depend on that. This is really the type of habitat that typically people look at and they just see it as a mess that needs to be cleaned up, and they go in and just mow it down. They'll turn it into lawn, or maybe turn it into large trees. But this sort of scrub thicket habitat is really important for birds, especially young birds when they're hiding and foraging. A lot of times in our area, this is unfortunately largely those invasive species that I mentioned, like multiflora rose and bush honeysuckle. But those do provide great habitat for the birds, so it's kind of a balance. For that reason, on our preserves, you will find lots of invasive species. We have hedgerows at our Russian Woods Preserve where our bird team does our bird banding. Those hedgerows are largely honeysuckle and privet, non-native species, invasive species, but they provide great habitat for the birds. If we were to go in and clear cut all of those, then we would be eliminating useful habitat. Even though it is species that we don't want and species that we don't want to proliferate, we also don't want to go in and eliminate the habitat that the birds are using. And our research has found that the birds are using that habitat and are using that preserve for, really essential stopover locations during their migration. So what we do is kind of go in periodically and step by step we'll eliminate an area of invasive species, replant with native species, so that we are replenishing the habitat but not eliminating it entirely all at once. We did recently do a project at Russian Woods Preserve in that hedgerow where they're doing their bird banding, where we eliminated about, I would say, it was like 25,000 square feet roughly area and we took out the invasive species. We went back and planted about 150, 160 native shrubs and small trees. And what we wanted to do was recreate the scrub shrub habitat that existed. So we didn't plant any large canopy trees. We planted shrubby thicket shrubs, some small trees. We planted it densely so that it would grow in together. And we planted species that have fruit that the birds are going to enjoy. And we're going to kind of let that mature, and then hopefully, each year maybe keep doing that same type of thing all along the hedgerow, and eventually begin to replace what's there, the invasive habitat that we don't want. So grassland and meadow are the sort of the two other ones, and they kind of go hand in hand in terms of their management. And these are really important for birds also. There are bird species that really depend on large swaths of open grassland, birds like meadowlarks and bobolinks that will only breed in areas of grassland that are vast, like at least 60, 70, 80 acres of open land. They don't like to rear their young near edge habitat where there might be predators. So this type of open grassland is vital for those types of species. It's also great because it allows us to maintain those diverse meadow and grassland native species. So all the native wildflower species that we maintain in meadows and grasslands, which is also beneficial for insects and pollinators. Everything that the birds like to eat, and all the pollinators that are so essential. So meadows and grasslands we really manage in the same way. In this area, pretty much any sort of open grassland or meadow area is going to kind of naturally want to return to forest. So if you let it go, the woody things will grow in and take over. So the basic sort of management tool we use for these areas is mowing. We'll mow them ideally once they're established once a year. We time our mowing so that we mow in early spring, usually mid to late March. Cut it down once, and that knocks down sort of any of the woody stuff that might be growing in, if there's trees or shrubs or invasive vines, stuff like that. And then all the native perennials and grasses can fill in throughout the year. Some folks will also mow in the fall. We like to keep everything up in the fall and through the winter because that's really important insect and bird habitat and food. So, but yes, a lot. So meadows, if you have a good established native meadow, it really does take care of itself. You mow it once a year, and the perennials that are there, if you have the right sort of mix, then they will grow in and thrive together, and they'll be, spread and populated by the pollinators and the birds, and it's fantastic. It can be a bit more of a challenge to get it established because, again, of invasive pressure. So I'll talk a little more now about meadow restoration and meadow management. since we are working on a project right now through a grant funded by the state to transform areas being managed as lawn to native meadow. So I'll kind of talk about how we're doing that, how we manage some meadows on our preserves, and how we're working on some of those meadows on private land. So when you think about meadow restoration, I'm going to use sort of an example of Kestrel Hill Preserve. This is our brand new preserve, not yet open to the public, but hopefully later this year. Stay tuned. So we acquired this preserve, and when we did, we had these 2 fields that were previously kept in a corn and soybean ag rotation year after year. It's about 25 acres total across 2 different fields. So right away, we knew we wanted to make that good habitat, either grassland or meadow habitat. And we wanted to act fast because the fields were just kind of fallow, just some corn stubble left. But because year after year they had been treated under agriculture with herbicides, it was really just a bare soil. And we didn't want to let that go and let the soil erode and run off. So we thought, well, we could just do a cover crop or, something like that. We figured there was no better time to just get in there and seed it. So we got seed. We did 2 different types of seeds. In this upper field, we did a showy sort of meadow and grassland mix. In this lower field, we did a mix of just warm season grasses, warm and cool season grasses, native grasses. For a couple of reasons. Number one was just to sort of diversify the habitat. Some of the grassland habitat is better, again, for some of those bird species. Also, just because the full-on showy meadow mix is a lot more expensive than the grass mix, so we had to work with what we could do. Just kind of go through the steps of looking at a meadow restoration, beginning with site preparation. Typically, when you're looking at, especially if you're seeding a meadow, it's really vital to be able to seed directly into the soil. A lot of times that can mean herbicide to kill off, if you're working with turf, you got to kill the turf so you can get to the soil. There's different ways to do that. Some people will solarize turf with plastic or cardboard, things like that. We were lucky at this site because it was in a crop rotation. It was already a blank canvas. We didn't actually have to do any treatment, which was beneficial and really allowed us to do it quickly because of the savings in cost. You want to kind of look at the species that you want and the planting method. Again, seeds or plugs. Are you guys familiar with plugs, landscape plugs? They're just a type of plant, like a really small plant in a tube that can be really simple. They come in flats of like 50 plugs, 50 different plants. You can just pop out, stick in the ground, really easy, really great way to plant hundreds of plants at one time. So that's those are really the 2 main methods for planting meadow areas, either seeding or plugging. They have their benefits and their detriments. Seeds, when you're planting native seed, these native meadow species really take time to establish. The first thing they do is really focus on establishing their root systems, so it can be a year or 2, maybe even 3, until you really start to see them emerging and see a change above the ground. And for that reason, the first few years of management are critical. After you put those seeds in, if they do take time, then you sort of are leaving open this vacant space where invasives can start to encroach. So it's really important to, when we do that, monitor, make sure that we're managing for the invasives. Again, that's typically done by mowing. So like I said, once a meadow's established, you mow once a year. But in these early years, the first year especially, you might mow 2, 3, 4 times kind of throughout the season to knock down some of those either annual species, annual non-natives, or some of the invasives that might be coming in. While everything kind of, the stuff that you planted gets established in the soil, give it a chance to germinate and grow up. Plugs are great because they'll give you a result right away. You can put them in and they're already germinated, so you'll get faster results. They'll fill in faster, so they'll be able to outcompete. Really, the best method is a combination of seeding and plugging. Plugs sometimes can be a little more detrimental in terms of the deer. I've heard lots of stories about people planting plugs and the deer just come along, the next day and we'll just pop them right back out. So you don't tend to have quite that problem with seed because, again, they really get their roots established first. So the deer can't just pop them out. Even if they get nibbled, they'll probably end up coming back from their root, from their rootstock. But just, you have to be patient with a meadow again. Because of the nature of these plants, they can take a little time to get established. You might look at your meadow the first year and think, like, this looks like crap. What did I do? There's nothing here. But it really does take a little time. We had an example of at one of our preserves. I had an Eagle Scout that came out, and part of his project was planting about 300 or 400 plugs. He planted, I think, like 200 native grass plugs and 200 forbs. And for the first really year and a half, we didn't see anything. I would go back and look, and there was really nothing germinating. But then last summer, we went in and we were managing for some invasive thistle in that area of the preserve. So we did a mow sort of in June just to knock the thistle down so that it wasn't going to seed and spreading. And after we did that, we started seeing these rows of grasses come up. It was the plugs that he had put in almost 2 years before. So a lot of them survived and were now starting to pop out and thrive. So after that, we kind of went back to that area and started doing more planting, adding more sort of native plugs, mostly grasses, to start to fill in the area more. Since we were already managing for the thistle, hopefully outcompete the thistle as we manage it, replace it with some of those native grasses. So yeah, it can really take a bit of time for that stuff to express itself, but it's worth it in the long run. So this is that upper field right here at Kestrel Hill Preserve. So this is, here's our stewardship manager in the tractor. He's got a drill seeder on the back of the tractor with our seed, and he's seeding this meadow last year, just about a year ago, at the end of last April. And this is really what it looked like. It was just sort of bare soil. We did go through with a mower once just to knock down all the corn stubble, but we seeded right into this. And by August of that year, we had all of this Black-Eyed Susan had germinated from the seed mix. So we used a seed mix from Ernst Seeds. They're a local seed company. They source a lot of local ecotype seeds, meaning seeds that they source locally. So it's not, Black-Eyed Susan is a native plant, but if you're getting Black-Eyed Susan seed from Michigan, it can vary versus Black-Eyed Susan seed from Chester County. So it's local ecotype seed from here. They include stuff like Black-Eyed Susan because they know that's going to germinate quickly. There are some species like the Black-Eyed Susan or coneflower that tend to kind of express themselves quickly, while the other stuff slowly establishes roots and germinates. So we did see some other, species like Coreopsis, things like that, some of the coneflower that were germinating, but not necessarily flowering last year. But we did get this really nice field of Black-Eyed Susans. So this year, and again, so the management for this was, last year we mowed this a few times. I think we mowed it 3 times after we seeded it. Mainly because a lot of times when you have a meadow seed mix, they will include a cover crop, which is usually an annual ryegrass species, and that's included because it's something that's going to germinate and grow in quickly and take up space. So it helps prevent the soil erosion that you might see. If your native species are really slow to germinate, you have something that is taking up space, maybe helping to keep out some invasives and holding that soil in place. But it's good to mow that because it's an annual species and it will go to seed, and then you'll have it year after year when you don't necessarily want so much of that. So you mow that before it goes to seed, and you also knock down some of the other annual weed pressure. And when you mow a meadow, you mow it at least 6 inches is a good height, 6 to 8 inches high, and that allows you to clear any sort of germinating species that might be low to the ground. So this seed mix is the same seed mix that we're using in all of our lawn to meadow conversion projects, and I will talk about that a little more shortly, just to give you a sense. But just a couple other examples for you. So this is another meadow restoration that was done some years ago. This is at our trust office. This is right across the street, actually, from Kestrel Hill Preserve that I was just showing you. And this is not a great picture, but was really the best picture I could find of this planting project. This was pulled out of some type of newsletter from 2008. This is a group of volunteers just planting plugs out in this turf. So there's about an acre of turf that was just being mowed outside of our office. And they actually just went out and planted right into the turf. They cut it real short and made sure that, when they planted, they were clearing some of the turf immediately around it. But they started in 2008. They went out and they created these 20-foot by 20 plots where they put in, a variety of different native meadow species. And just started there. And so this is that same area looking from a different angle 2 years later. So you can see this is one of their initial plots. So this is all the turf the way it was before they planted. You can see some of the turf grass species that are growing in here, but those really robust native meadow species are able to grow really well. So they did this, and then kind of for a few years they kept adding different plots and planting more. So then the following year, this is that same area. Back from the other side, you can see those native species here. They started letting more of the grass just grow and not cutting it. So you can see that filling in here. A few years later, in 2015, they planted more. Things are spreading, but it's really filling out. Again, it's growing alongside some of those turf species, but the natives are doing really well. And then by 2021, this was really thick and robust, just a really excellent mix of native meadow species. Milkweed and mountain mint and goldenrods and phlox and all kinds of really cool stuff. So this is in front of our office. There's some trails through here, and this is a really nice example. In the middle of the summer, if you go out, you're welcome to go and kind of walk through here, and just a great look at kind of some of the native meadow species that you can include in your yard. So, the lawn conversion program that I've mentioned. So the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, through Pennsylvania, they had a grant program, and they still do, where they provide funding to convert areas being managed as lawn to native meadow. We applied and received this grant with a proposal to convert about 50 acres of lawn. And we proposed to do this, partner with private landowners. So we weren't just going to convert our own properties. We were going to reach out to landowners, either folks that have conservation easements that we work with, or folks in the community. We did want to kind of make a point to try to find different groups, like schools or churches or municipalities, different sizes of lawn. So people, somebody has 20 acres that they can turn into lawn, or somebody with a third of an acre that they can do in their backyard. So we really wanted to diversify, kind of show great examples of how people in different circumstances can really still use this type of meadow habitat and get a lot out of it. Really, our first partnership was with Inverary, an HOA in Radnor Township. They had about 8 acres of lawn area that was just being mowed throughout the summer. And folks in the community were wondering why. They wanted more out of it. They, wanted areas where they could walk and enjoy the space, enjoy the nature. And it was the perfect opportunity. So we partnered with them. We seeded about 8 acres. Like I said, this field here is 5 to 6 acres roughly. There's another site sort of on the other side of their property above a pond and stream where they also did some meadow restoration. So this site, again, this was seeded last year in April, and same site in the middle of the summer. Again, you have those black-eyed Susans coming in and some of the native grasses that were seeded. And that was, a difference of a few months. And this year, I actually just drove by this site on the way here, and I can already see some pretty awesome diversity growing in and germinating. So that's really exciting, and it's kind of what you expect. The first few years, you get more diversity, more different species coming up, and things starting to kind of fill in and grow together. That's a large site, a whole community, an HOA that we were able to work with. This is just somebody's front yard in Berwyn. They don't like grass. They don't want their yard to just be turf. They said get rid of all of it. We kind of had to actually talk them down a little bit, like, leave your neighbor's driveway some space because they're not going to like you if all your plants are falling in the driveway. So this was seeded last April as well and turned into this. Again, the common thread for all these sites is the black-eyed Susans that really did well that first year, which is great. We try to tell all these folks, like I've kind of said, the first year can really not look great. things could be slow, and it might, you might be mad at us for the first summer, but no, it was really nice that the black-eyed Susan gave everything some color. We work with Westchester Borough as well at a couple of their wastewater treatment sites. They had problems with some stormwater runoff and erosion, and they wanted to kind of stop mowing portions of this hill where they were having floodwaters come in from this other, from uphill here. So we just took a large strip and planted it and got really nice results there. So this program's ongoing. We've seeded about 28 acres. We have another roughly 20 lined up. So we're about meeting our goal, which is, it's really cool, and it's a really great way to kind of see that folks are interested in this, kind of introduce these ideas to new communities and introduce our organization to new folks and new communities. And it's been really rewarding. There's just a lot of interest in this type of thing. And it's great that, the state has funding for it, and that they're, putting money into this type of thing. There's also a similar grant from DCNR, from the same group, to convert or to plant riparian areas or streamside areas with natives. With this lawn conversion program, it restricts areas, so we're not allowed to convert within 30 or 50 feet of a stream, body of water. But our watershed program, we have a watershed research program at the Trust, and they received this grant for riparian planting, so we're able to, come in with that grant as well and fill in those gaps. So like at Inverary, for example, the HOA, we went over and we seeded the meadow sort of around their ponds and their streams, and then we came back in with the plants from this riparian grant and planted over 400 trees and shrubs around their pond and their stream. So just like a wholesale site restoration, all funded by the state, and really successful. So to kind of get in a little bit more to how this might translate to your property, I've shown you some examples already, but we want folks to kind of think about, rather than having a lawn that looks like this, turning into a lawn that looks like this, that's really working for the environment and for nature and diverse and providing all those benefits. This is an extreme example, obviously, but just to give you an idea. So just going back to kind of how we started talking about our habitat at our preserves, you just kind of look at what you have and what habitat you can get out of it. You have open spaces, open lawn, full sun, or just traditional gardens that are not in great shape that are out in the open. You can really transform that into meadow or grasses. Utilize your shrub. So if you have borders that are kind of invaded or just neglected, or you're not sure what to do with, go in there and start incorporating the natives. Put up a bird box. The birds are going to be in there. Bring, just little by little. If you can't do it all at once, start eliminating the honeysuckle that's in there and plant some native shrubs. Or shade gardens. If you have a shady garden or an area under a tree that's just mulched, incorporate some native plants there to get really more of like a woodland garden feel, especially under trees. It's really important not to mow up to the base of trees. Mulch is better, but really vegetation is great. There's lots of species of caterpillars that will drop from the tree in the winter to pupate in the turf or in the vegetation underneath, and when it's just turf or if it's mowed, they don't survive. So just a tip. So I'll just run through kind of quickly some good native replacements for some very common sort of landscape species. If you're looking at like large-scale trees, Norway maple or Paulownia, Zelkova, species like river birch, black gum and red maple are fantastic for fall color. White oak is one of our most ecologically beneficial species. White oak on its own in this area hosts over 450, I believe, different species of caterpillar just by itself. So oaks, birches, and cherries are really like the keystone species. If you're familiar with Doug Tallamy, entomologist from the University of Delaware, his book, Bringing Nature Home, if you want to learn more about this, just pick up that book. It goes through all the things I'm talking about tonight. It's a really great, just gives great examples of, exactly what species are benefiting what bugs and, why it's important to transform, spaces wherever we can. So these are sort of the smaller, medium-sized trees that are kind of showy or flowering species like Japanese maple or Korean dogwood, saucer magnolia, incorporating more just native dogwood, Florida dogwood or pagoda dogwood, red buckeye, red bud, of course. Choke cherries are really good native cherry species for birds, rather than just sort of a typical Yoshino cherry that you can incorporate. That's Ohio buckeye. And then shrubs. Sort of typical landscape shrubs like burning bush and barberry that I talked about, or boxwood. Strawberry bush is the native variety of burning bush. It's a native euonymus, also called hearts of Burston because of the really cool flowering and seed heads that it gets. Fragrant sumac is a really nice plant that gets some really nice fall color. Sort of spice bush. Spice bush is unique because it's really the one species that is proliferating readily throughout our woodlands because the deer don't really bother that. But that's a great native shrub as well. And winterberry holly, obviously really good winter interest. Some of the typical sort of flowering shrub species like the Asian hydrangea or viburnum or hibiscus. We do have really nice native viburnum species like nannyberry or possum haw. We have a native wild hydrangea that can be really nice. Witch hazel is great, just Virginia witch hazel, which flowers in the winter. And swamp rose mallow is a really cool native hibiscus that does well in wetter areas. And then just all the native wildflowers. Rather than going back to the hardware store every spring and picking out a bunch of annuals and having to replant them every year, you can really think about just establishing more of a native meadow that will regenerate itself year after year. I mentioned some of the woody species, the oaks and the birch and the cherries are really the keystone species that Doug Tallamy calls out for being host plants for insects. The herbaceous species that he likes to call out are native sunflowers, native asters, and native goldenrods. So those are really great to incorporate. Mountain mint is an awesome species to include. It's the pollinators go wild for it. The deer don't really like it. The deer will munch on whatever you put in the ground, but if you diversify, that's really kind of the best way to combat that. When you have lots of different species that are growing and flowering and germinating throughout the year at different times and things, that can kind of really help to combat, just the pressure from deer coming in and trying to mow everything down. And native grasses, both cool season and warm season grasses These are just a few examples that do really well, and they can really provide an excellent sort of break in the texture. They really help to fill a space out. They provide a different look and different habitat. So it's a really great way to include more natives and kind of have a more unique sort of garden space. So, I want people to kind of rethink typical garden design, where you have, and I apologize if any of these belong to you, but, if you have a garden space like this where it's 2 or 3 species of non-native plants and a lot of mulch, why not diversify that, fill those spaces with native plants, more species, more season-long interest, less mulching, and more benefit for wildlife. So, that's a really sort of quick look at a lot of what we're doing and a lot of possibilities. But if you ever need sort of inspiration, again, this is a photo of that same meadow outside of our office where we have trails that is open to the public. We also have our 3 nature preserves that are open daily to the public, where you can find lots of examples of these types of habitat, these types of native species that we're working with and managing. And again, the Kestrel Hill Preserve, which we expect to be coming soon. So yeah, come find us, come check us out. You can get great examples of what you can do, and try. Hopefully, I'll see you out there. I'm out there sometimes, but yeah, that's it. But I'll take any questions anyone might have.
Because we're being recorded, we want to hear your question.
I have an area in the back I could transform into a meadow, but who can you get to cut it to such a height? My lawnmower won't do that.
Yeah, so there are, and that's sort of a common question. So for our lawn conversion program that we're doing with the state, we do work with a contractor, an ecological contractor called Land Studies, and there are, especially now, more and more of those types of groups popping up. But there are sort of those ecological restoration firms that specialize in native plantings and management and that type of thing. So, yeah, it's obviously it's uncommon to have that type of equipment. I think it's probably uncommon even for your typical landscapers to have that type of equipment. They're just have their regular riding mowers. But so there are groups that you could reach out to that could help with that. It's when you do have an established meadow, the good thing is even if you kind of have to outsource that work, you pay for it once during the year rather than mowing weekly throughout the summer. It can equate to really a net positive in costs. So.
And what do you think of having sheep come once in a while, too? Because the township doesn't allow that right now.
No, okay.
I asked.
I think there are definite benefits. Goats, sheep, donkeys. I even heard yesterday from someone that was talking about the donkeys eating the thistles in their garden. Yeah, that's really sort of historically that was the meadow and grassland maintenance was the herds of migrating animals. So yeah, I think that is a really good management strategy. It's not one that we've been able to use yet at our preserves, but I would really like to. Spots where we have rampant, invasives or poison ivy rampant, even though it's a native, not something we want covering our meadows. So yeah, I would definitely be a proponent of that. What else?
I don't know. I'm wild about this idea, and I've been wild about it for a while, but I don't know how to get started. And I don't know if that program that you talked about was possible to, or if you could recommend someone. I mean, I don't feel physically like I can do the whole thing, but
Yeah.
I'm game,
Okay.
very game to
Yeah.
getting started.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely give you recommendations. believe we have a card that has some of the groups that I mentioned, some of those contracting groups that I mentioned. It also has local nurseries that specialize in natives, so good places to, and resources as well, that have great information. If you're specifically interested in the grant program, I can talk to you about that as well, to see if you're interested. So.
Does Radnor have any ordinances or guidance for residents about the placement of any rewilding attempts? Can they be incorporated into the right-of-way? Are there like vegetation height restrictions currently?
I'm not particularly familiar with those specific ordinances. You could go to the Radnor Township website, and they do list all the ordinances. And there is a search engine that you can try to see. Otherwise, I would approach the Parks and Recreation Department about right-of-way plantings.
I'm with the Inverary community, and I will give a shameless, huge plug for the Conservation Trust. They were phenomenal, phenomenal to work with, particularly Mike. So we did the 8 acres. We're about to do another 4 acres. And then we did the riparian planting in the fall. And these guys are phenomenal to work with. I really can't say enough about how knowledgeable they are and how customer friendly they are. And I would say the same about land studies. If you're looking for a contractor, our experience with them has just been incredible. So.
Thanks, Marty. That's our audience plant that we bring everywhere.
Just to add as well, we've converted about 50% of our lawn space over the last, we've moved here 7 years ago. And there's a contractor that we work with, Eco Landscaping, that's what they do. We've used the Ernst seed mix. Couple of questions for you, though, administratively. Where do you get your funding, and how is your organization? How are you organized?
So for our organization, our funding is pretty much it's all donor based. We have a really excellent and robust donor base. We also rely a lot on grant funding. But yeah, it's really just our supporters, our donors that we rely on. We have, a whole departments for our development and fundraising specifically, and just making sure that we're able to pay our employees and pay the bills. So it's for stewardship specifically, we could always use a lot more. So it's but yeah, it's nonprofit. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But yeah, so for us, like projects, we rely a lot on just grant funding through the state or the county. Township is very supportive. So, for example, the Kestrel Hill Preserve that I've mentioned a few times was a site that we had to purchase. So we're currently, doing a campaign to raise the money necessary to pay back the purchase of that property. We did receive grants through the state, through the county, through the township that helped pay for that. But yeah, it's really all about cultivating donors. Yeah. So our organization, I didn't give too much background, but we started almost 30 years ago in 1996. Just a group in the community that really wanted to see it protected. It kind of spun out of Brandywine Conservancy, who had done some work in the community already with some conservation easements. But then our organization kind of split off and started to really focus their efforts. And it's been growing and successful since then. But yeah, it's just lots of folks that are passionate and interested in the community that want to support us. And there's, if you want more information about that, we have, our website. There's information on the table, but yeah, definitely check us out.
We also just installed 8 birdhouses, bluebird houses. Again, with the trust, and their person was phenomenal on that. So we're seeing some bluebird action in our meadows, which is very exciting.
Yes, we have these phenomenal program areas, stewardship department, what we do, I talked about, but our bird program, again, we host events. We have an education center at Rushton Preserve, and, we have public events. We'll have dinners. We have a community farm as well at Rushton that has a CSA. So, lots of ways to get involved, and lots of ways that sort of our amazing staff are reaching out and kind of educating folks on what we're doing and why it's important, and so that helps a lot with the support.
So on that note, does your website have volunteer events posted?
Yes,
So just keep checking.
we do. Yes, stewardship department specifically, we have volunteer days weekly. Every Thursday morning, we host volunteer groups throughout our preserves. We also do occasional sort of just volunteer groups, either community groups or school groups, stuff like that. But our other departments have volunteers as well. Our farm has every Wednesday volunteer days. We just show up. Wednesdays is what they call it. You just show up on the farm and you can help out. Our watershed and bird programs also do volunteer days. So, but that's all. We have an events calendar page on our website, and that has all of our, our public events, but also our volunteer days and all that information. So,
Great.
Hi, Mike. I'm Nancy Conrad, and I was with Lissitor.
Mm-hmm.
I am with Lissitor on their Landscape and Grounds Committee. And Mike was a huge, huge help. We just planted this year in March with Land Studies, or actually it was in May, just this last week, 2.2 acres on our meadow. And that's a big deal because most of our residents love cut turf. So we are so excited about it right now. And the guidance that WCT gave, and Mike specifically, has been amazing. And then Land Studies coming in as well. So we're super excited. We're hoping that we can do more. Of course, getting through an HOA board and doing all the things you have to, but you guys have been incredibly patient, and we're super excited. So, stop by if you're in the Newtown Square Lissitor area, because you're just starting to see a first year of this meadow. And we'll use plugs. We're just about to plant the plugs, too.
Okay.
So we're excited. And personally, I did 2 birdhouses, and I am seeing more bluebirds than I've ever seen, which is awesome. So your bluebird house program is fantastic, and the people who put it in are fantastic, too. Yeah.
that's great. I'm really glad that you were able to go through with that and get it planted. That's exciting.
Just a little more. We couldn't use the grants because of our HOA bylaws.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Excited.
I'll have to come by.
Yeah, thank you.
Any others?
I had a quick one. Do you have any estimate on the cost savings? I mean, you mentioned that there's quite a bit of upfront cost to getting it started, and then over time, maintenance costs go down, and it's less than mowing a regular lawn. Do you have any estimates, ballpark?
So for converting and seeding a lawn, we kind of ballpark around between $3,000 and $4,000 per acre of area that you're converting, and that's sort of the prep work and the seed and the seeding. That's sort of the cost that we're working with. That's kind of what we've found just going through this program. In terms of savings for just what you spend on mowing, I mean you think about it, if you're maintaining a turf lawn, you're spending money to mow. You're spending money for gas. You're probably spending money on fertilizer and watering and all that. So it can really add up. I know Inverary did a sort of analysis of that. That might be more helpful.
We converted it to 8 acres, and those 8 acres were costing us $28,000 annually to maintain for the grass cutting, fertilization, and it cost us, I think, $3,900 with their program. So, along with the environmental benefits,
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Is it hard to keep out all the invasive vines?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so the main way, in a meadow that we battle the vines is again the mowing. The vines are woody, and you mow, and that'll knock them down annually, but they are fast and aggressive. So, there's different ways to go about it. You can go in there, and it really depends on the site and the scope and how much sort of capacity you have to do the work. But you can go in and cut that stuff down. A lot of what we do for our vines and our meadows is we'll go in and cut it down and use a little herbicide to paint the stump. So we're not going in and like broadcast spraying the leaves, but we'll cut and just do a little dab on the stump. So
And that works.
it helps. It's, I'm thinking of bittersweet specifically. They have just massive systems of roots, and they're all spreading throughout the ground underneath the soil. So it can help. I'm not going to tell you it's going to fully eliminate it, because it's really difficult to do so without like really aggressive herbicide treatments. That's like really, which obviously, we try to limit our herbicide use as much as we can. So we've kind of found, like trying to target areas where it might be bad, or where there might be really nice sort of native species that we want to protect, knock it down there. Maybe, do some stump painting with herbicide. Otherwise, it's just sort of you have to go out each year, probably multiple times, and cut it down, which, it'll keep it off the good stuff and let that stuff fill in. But, it's not going to eliminate it, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
I'm new to native perennials. Deal with energy more. The soil that you're starting with, you go from crops to meadows or lawns to meadows. What can you say about that? Is there different responses to different soil types? Like my backyard is clay. You just go under what is the lawn? It's clay, and it fails the seepage test. So,
Yeah, if that's the first thing to think about is kind of just how hydric the soil is. If it's wet or not very well drained, then you might want to use species specific to wetter areas, riparian areas, or wetlands. The nice thing about using natives is typically, you don't need to use all the amendments that, turf or some ornamentals might need, like fertilizer or feeding, or that tends to really just help the non-native stuff where the invasives come in. The natives, if you put them in the right place, they want to be there, and they're gonna thrive. We had some concerns specifically with like the ag fields that I mentioned, just having been treated year after year for so long that maybe the soil might not work, or things might not really want to grow there. But we found some pretty immediate great results, so it seems like things are okay. And it's as long as the soil is not too compacted, or and you're putting the right species in the right place. Again, just whether it's a wetland or if it's upland or full sun or shade, pick your species according to that, and they tend to work themselves out.
thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. So again, we have lots of information over here on the back table. Gretchen is back there. Gretchen works with us as well. We have my information is back there. If you have more specific questions, and you can feel free to reach out to me. And pick up some of our literature there. And thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.
Again, if anyone's starting out small, I have 10 free perennials, native perennials in the back of my truck in compostable pots, so they're free for the taking. And I have a planting guide for them as well.